Good afternoon. Welcome to the 2024 SISAP Cybersecurity Conference and another session here from SISAP. Today, we're going to talk about real-time threat detection and what ingredients goes into real-time threat detection. Joining us today, we have a very special guest. His name is Snehal Contractor. Snehal is joining us and is responsible for the global systems engineering at Stellar Cyber. He's an engineering professional with over 30 years of experience in technical sales, marketing, and management. Snehal has worked up for such notable startups as NetScreen, Palo Alto, Riverbed, Fortinet, Aerohive, Cisco, and US Robotics. During his tenure at these companies, he supported some of the largest service providers in the space. Those service providers include, Dimension Data, Verizon, French Telecom, AT&T, Foresight Security, and Sprint. All of these accounts eventually became partners of his company. Snehal is called upon to be a trusted consultant to onboard these global partners from business development to a complete technical enablement. Snehal has a Bachelor's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science from the University of Illinois. So it's with my pleasure to welcome Snehal to this year's conference and discuss real-time threat detection, the key aspects that go into preparing and executing that strategy, and what it means to be successful. So thank you, Snehal, for joining us today. Okay. Cyber attacks are becoming increasingly sophisticated, right? And with these threat actors constantly evolving tactics and techniques to bypass traditional defenses, organizations need to be able to detect and respond in real time to minimize that potential damage. So I've asked Snehal to kind of think about what the theme is this year and think about how we can explain the power of readiness. Right? When I think of readiness, I think of battles, I think of war, I think of preparing to do battle. And when I think of being prepared, I think everything that comes to the left of detection and then also everything that comes to the right of detection. So when we're talking left of detection, that's all the preparation, that's all the things that we put in place to make sure that we are able to detect, and then the response after in recovery afterwards. So now, I know in our discussions, we've had some really good discussions, and knowing your experience, you see organizations all the time that face challenges when starting up. What are some of those challenges that you see that companies face when preparing to implement detection capabilities?
Yeah, Derek, first, and thank you for inviting me. Thank you, CSAP, for giving me this opportunity to be with you and just building a great relationship and partnership here. But for preparedness, a lot of companies, let's face some of the facts that are today, right? One, nobody is starting security from scratch, right? Nobody is coming to you and saying, well, I don't have any security tools. I've got tools that I've already invested in, right? I've got firewalls in place. I've got IDS systems in place. I've probably got EDRs in place. So I've got all of these tools already in place, but why am I still being breached, right? There's a couple of things. One is you may not have 100% visibility in your entire attack surface, your entire environment. Applications and data is all over the places, right? You've got data, traditionally on-prem. A lot of the data is moving into the cloud in SaaS applications. Virtualization, right? You may have network visibility on your physical network, but may not have visibility on your east-west traffic inside a virtual environment. So first and foremost is having 100% visibility into your environment. And that's what companies are constantly being struggling with, which is, do I have that visibility? So how do you get that visibility? Well, we say use and embrace the products that you possibly already have in your environment, right? If I want visibility to all of my endpoints, I've got an EDR solution. If I want visibility to my traffic that's going in and out of my environment, in and out of my network, I've got firewalls, right? Look, IDS devices looking for exploits and so on and so forth. So these tools are there. What we need to understand is now filling in the gaps where you don't have visibility with the tool sets that you have. So that's one, is just providing visibility, right? So I think that's one of the challenges, and that's want to make sure we address that first and foremost. Having the tools, having the detection, all that's great, but the bad actors are going to look for areas to penetrate your network where you don't have visibility.
Absolutely. I think, when looking at the state of maturity on organizations, I mean, and I've been in this industry for quite a long time, I see that we see a varying state of maturity, even in US-based companies, but specifically down in Latin America. It's everything from, we've got a few things like you stated to, we've got a lot of things, but it's not really in a coordinated fashion. Some of the challenges that I see, and I'm going to add to your list, is, you may not see the east-west traffic, but in some of these organizations, as they continue to grow, they grow through acquisition, they go through, purchasing of specific technology. They have blind spots that they don't know they have blind spots in, and then they don't know where their data is, and they may have tools, and those tools need to be coordinated. So when I talk in a lot of presentations about preparedness for actually talking into real-time detection, but I end up talking specifically about baseline maturity in understanding specific things and getting things aligned in your security program in order to get that visibility of the tools that you currently have, and then move into the actual alerting on those things. So, and I'm sure you've seen that similarly. So, one of the big things I want to focus on here is the ingredients, right? The ingredients that go into doing what we do. We have these tools, but it's not just monitoring or looking at or pulling logs from specific things. I think
Correct.
There's a really, we all want the cake, but we all need to think about what pieces go into that cake in order to be, so that everybody has the same experience and get what they can out of it. So I've got a list of things here, and I like to do this when I'm doing panels, is have a quick, give you maybe a thought, and then you can give me a feedback on what that is in a brief response. Okay. So if we're thinking about the ingredients, what about asset management? What are your thoughts on asset management as an ingredient?
Well, yeah, asset management is part of visibility. Right? Understanding and knowing every single asset that you have in your environment is critical. Understanding the criticality of every single asset is critical. Understanding the threat landscape, or what we can call is the security event for each one of those assets, is critical. Once you have the data, once you understand the where the asset stands in your network, can you only take an action on it, right? So it goes back to visibility and understanding how critical that asset is, and if it's got any security events associated with it.
Absolutely. So one of the things when we used to talk about an asset management standpoint, and then criticality, right, is if you didn't know the criticality of things, you have to protect it all at the highest level of your criticality, right?
Correct.
That way you can't cover it up. Okay. And that takes us into real-time monitoring. How does real-time monitoring play into threat detection?
So real-time monitoring is something that is expected by your customers. They're going to demand that. They're not going to say, well, hey, I've got this alert, but 15 minutes later, is when I've identified and alerted on it. Well, I've got 15 minutes of possibly data that exfiltrated. So real-time alerting is important, but many tools provide that, right? Many tools will provide real-time alerting. When something happens, they're going to let you know. But what the analyst is challenged with is I've got 50 possible tools in my environment. How can I possibly look at each one of those monitors or those tools and look for those real-time events? So first, real-time monitoring and having the detections is important, but how fast can that analyst take a look at that real-time event? And the critical real-time events is very important. So, a platform approach where you can see all of those real-time events and the system identifying which ones are critical is important.
Absolutely. And we'll get into some of the challenges later, and I think that leads us into a greater discussion on that, and we'll get to that in a second. What about threat intelligence? I mean, threat intelligence, to me, I'm passionate about it because I have an entire team that does that, but what are your thoughts on threat intelligence?
Yeah, threat intelligence is a service that is being provided by quite a few companies. It's, basically identifying devices in the wild that's probably going to tell you what their, it's one example, tell you what their reputation is. Threat intelligence, when combined with your existing tools, is very powerful. Just having threat intelligence is okay, but having threat intelligence combined with the logs that are coming in from your current tools is important. I'll give you an example. A firewall log, right? A basic firewall log is going to tell you that I had an IP address, an internal device that's talking to some external device. Okay, great. It's a log. It was a permit log. But the threat intelligence feed is going to take that log message, take that public IP, and attach a reputation to it, as well as geolocation to it, right? But it's going to attach a reputation, so now you can identify critical security events that say, hey, this particular IP address that the internal IP address is talking to, or this server that the internal asset is talking to, is actually hosting ransomware. So threat intelligence is critical part of a security platform.
Right, and the fundamentals of threat intelligence is, it's not just, like you said, getting information, looking the news and everything. Threat intelligence has transformed the way we do things because we do those in an automated fashion. We get those IOCs, we get the information that actually we can write or utilize tools to alert on specific things about that reputation, right? Thank you. One of the newer terms that we see in the industry right now is threat hunting. How do you see threat hunting playing into this as an ingredient to real-time threat detection?
Yeah, so you've got two pieces. One is the real-time threat detection, which the analysts, the two things the analysts are probably the most important pieces of their job is for that real-time threat analysis, but also threat hunting. Having the ability to go look for things in an environment, in their environment, right? But the challenge we see today still is, where do I do the threat hunting, right? I've got something that's happened in my environment. Where do I do the threat hunting? Do I do it on my EDR? Do I do it on my firewall? Where do I actually do the threat hunting, which is a critical part of a security analyst's job? So they're spending more time trying to figure out where I'm supposed to do the threat hunting. So having a platform, again, having and giving the analysts visibility to all of their logs, all of their data, where they can do threat hunting across all of those tool sets, the entire part of their network, efficiently from a single search query is very important. An example would be, I want to see all traffic. I want to see if there's any devices that are talking to Russia. Well, I can ask my firewall. I can ask my EDR tools. I can ask my my NDR, my network detection response. So all of those will tell me, but I want to know based on across all of my tool sets where all the traffic, where from all the traffic is going to Russia. So threat hunting incredibly important. Threat hunting, making it easy, is also important. You know, the language that they're going to use, which should be a common Lucene language, right? I want to look for traffic to Russia, or to China, or to wherever, right? So, you know, threat hunting also in the next generation, or I should say in the upcoming generation, threat hunting should also, to make that analyst a bit more efficient, is to apply some generative AI, right? Instead of writing out an actual query, which we just talked about, the analyst should be able to just type in real, just normal language to say, hey, show me all traffic from all of my tools that's going to Russia. For an analyst, that's much more easier than writing a query. So threat hunting is becoming, you know, very, very advanced very soon here.
Yeah, I see I see threat hunting as a necessity, but I also see a lot of people utilizing it as a new key term. So when we see customers coming in asking for specific threat hunting, we end up into discussions about what they believe or what they're trying to accomplish. We firmly believe that threat hunting is necessary. We just want to do it in a means that actually produces something that of substantial value to a customer, right? Yep. It's not necessarily something, and I'm going to elaborate here, it's not necessarily something that you just go out and go, I'm going to go threat hunting, right? You have to build it upon something, and that's where we're talking about that monitoring. If that monitoring comes up with an alert, the threat hunter should be going and expanding that search based upon that theory or hypothesis that this is somewhere else in our environment. So I think it's great information. So we talked about learning, we talked about threat hunting. Part of the responsibilities of threat hunting, and maybe the analyst is doing that research. So how important is sandboxing? And maybe you can explain to us what sandboxing is, especially, you know, even.
Yeah, sandboxing is, in the basic form of sandboxing, is I've got an unknown, I'll take an example of a file that I saw. It's an unknown file. I've never seen this before. Do I let the user click on it and it's going to execute? Well, I can't take that risk, right? So the art of sandboxing is taking that file in real time, sending it into a sandbox environment. In a sandbox environment, what we would have are many different types of operating systems or devices. So you have that take that same file, run it into on a Linux server, Linux device, run it on a Windows machine, run it maybe in an iOS. So it could be a file that's on a mobile, run it in an iOS environment, run it in an Android environment. So I'm going to take this file and run it in many different environments. And then what I'll have is I'll have probes. I'll have external entities looking at the behavior of what that file's doing. And if we determine that's it acting malicious, we're going to block that file and not send it to the end user, right? Or we may come back with a verdict that says the file's good, go ahead and send it over. So a sandbox is an environment where we can test things before they get sent to an end user, where more damage can be caused.
Well, I thank you for that explanation, and that leads me to my next discussion. I mean, we've worked with sandboxing, but we also want to do that in a more rapid manner. So my next subject is automated response, right? Doing things in a manner which automatically get done. So how important do you think that is in the future of threat detection?
Yeah, detecting a threat, that's great. An analyst sitting there taking a response. We are humans at the end of the day. We do walk away for a little bit. We might miss something. Now, automated response there's a fine line there on what you can automate, because automated responses can also cause, unnecessary things in an environment, right? But for many things, automated response is a necessity. An analyst might walk away to do something, but there are some common things that you can automate. An example is, I know, using that threat intelligence feed we talked about earlier, using those firewalls rules that we talked about earlier. If I see I'll give an example of an automation. If I see that clearly an internal IP address is sending data to a server that's known to be ransomware, I want to block it. I should go to the firewall and block that automatically. If I see a username where the password someone tried 100 times to log in with, eventually maybe logged in, if I detected that, well, then I'm going to automate that and say, I want to go to Active Directory and disable that user. It's been compromised. Or go to the EDR device and quarantine or contain that host, right? So automation for many things is important. A lot of the common things, known things that is not going to create a denial of service, automation is very important.
Right, and I think that also comes to preparedness. I mean, I've seen, depending on an organization's risk tolerance, right, depends on how far they turn down that automated response.
Correct.
What we're seeing more and more now is from different alerting mechanisms, and it's coming into the processing system, and it's doing those automated responses. I'm seeing as we continue down this path, and as we move through technology, that the ability to actually have an inadvertent automated response and shut down your business is rising daily. So we need to be very, very careful about what our risk tolerance is in our organization. If we want to err on the side of a higher risk and just shut it off and deal with it and understand that it may stop our business, that needs to be compared with actually what the potential outcome of facing ransomware is, right? Every organization needs to understand what the risk tolerance is and how they want to do their automated response.
Right.
So
there's another level of automation also, Derek, which is, the common things, yes, that are known to be bad and malicious. Yeah, go ahead and block it, deny it, quarantine it. But there's also another level of, before I run this action, I'm going to have the analyst validate it, right? And that validation piece is important. That, is this really something that's wrong? And do you want me to go take this action? Maybe they can just click on a button. So I see the future. That's where we're headed, right? Is that validation before I automate and take an action.
And I'm going to skip here a little bit into a subject that is on everyone's mind right now, and how it may, in your opinion, play back towards this automated response. What about generative AI? How is that going to assist in any automated responses? Are we going to have now that things are changing and we're relying on the cognitive generative AI to make decisions, are we going to feel more comfortable in an automated response as a result of decisions made by generative AI?
I'm not sure if the industry's ready for it.
Okay.
For machine learning and AI to automatically take responses for them. Today, it's still, some of the bases that we talked about, some known things. Generative AI today, where it's excelling, is making your SOC analyst more efficient, right? Going back to just a SOC analyst wants to have that working maybe for documentation, right? I want to know how to do this. Show me this or that, right? So having that capability in the documentation is important, but going back to what the SOC analyst's job is, threat hunting, looking for threats, generative AI is going to be very, very important in that, where a SOC analyst doesn't have to sit there and try to figure out what I'm looking for, what query I need to create. They simply just want to speak in human language and said, This is what I'm looking for. Go ahead and build it, right?
Right.
It will also be used to you build maybe dashboards, right? Maybe reports. An analyst can say, build me a report for my CIO or my, any C-level, say, and these are the things that I want in it. And generative AI is going to go ahead and build you that report. So generative AI may not take over the automation yet. It'll help with it for sure, right? Based on learning the behavior patterns of assets and users and taking decisions that are things that are very concrete. But making the SOC analyst more efficient is probably going to be the top thing on most people's minds right now. Letting these SOC analysts do what their job is.
All right. In my opinion, I mean, we're going to be many years down the road before we actually get rid of the human analyst, because I still think there's a lot of technology that needs to be refined in order for us to do that. So one of the things that I think generative AI is going to help with is potentially, part of our resource problem. I mean, there's a lot of resources.
Yes.
That we're still needing in the cybersecurity industry. I think generative AI is going to help that because, like you said, it's going to make them more efficient at what they do. And at the end all, it's going to actually be, in my opinion, another teaching method for them, right? Okay. So there's a couple last things in here, and then we'll get into some of the challenges. Attack surface management. I know you talked earlier about having an understanding of assets, but how is that different from an attack surface management, in your opinion?
So when I think of attack surface management, it goes back to our original when we started off the conversation, which is having visibility, right? How can you have attack surface management without the visibility? So I think those two things tie together. First is having that visibility, understanding what type of data it is, and making sure we have the right tools to look for security events in that relevant data set, right? Different data sets require different tools. So we have to make sure first is we provide that coverage. And second, we have the right tool set to look for security events in that. Some examples, again, would be, if I'm looking for network level anomalous activity, I've got users, I've got assets. I'm going to baseline them, how they act day to day. And if they act anomalously, I'm going to go ahead and alert you or take an action on it, right? EDR device or your endpoints, you have to have some sort of a protection. And that's where you're going to have the EDR tools that's installed on it. So it's the visibility and then having the right tool sets to provide protection in that relevant data set.
Right, and I think the visibility is a key word here, right? As organizations continue to grow, their visibility and their understanding of the visibility of their, we'll call it the attack surface, becomes a little bit blurry. I coined a phrase a long time ago that today's proof of concept is tomorrow's legacy. If someone's dropping something out on a network segment and you don't know about it because it's a proof of concept, tomorrow it's legacy, and now it may be vulnerable, right? It becomes part of your attack surface, right? There are many ways out there of keeping that in your periphery so you understand as that attack surface grows. It also allows you to understand what those things that potentially you need to monitor, right? If the attack surface expands, there's obviously controls that need to be in there as well. The last one here, and this will lead into some of the challenges where you'll expand on some of this. We've talked about attack surface management. We've talked about firewalls. We talked about EDR. What's some thoughts on the correlations of alerts between those devices?
Well, the number one challenge globally today is piecing all the attacks timeline together, right? So you've got the right tools in place. I've got tools to protect my network. I've got tools to protect data in my cloud environment. I've got tools to provide my all of my clients, right? All of my desktops and stuff. The tools are there. It's not a lack of tools. An average company has 75 different tools, so you have the tools. The challenge you're faced with, the number one challenge you get faced with when you are compromised is, one, how did I get compromised? Second, how much damage did it do? How much lateral movement did it have? Third, was the data exfiltrated? So the good news is you've got 50 different tools to tell you that. I can ask my firewall if that compromised device made a outbound connection. I can look at my network data to see if there was lateral movement. I can check my EDR logs to see if one of the devices were compromised. An example is I just found a host that has ransomware. A company is challenged with how many other devices was that ransomware loaded on? How did the ransomware get in an environment? When did it get into my environment? Did that ransomware make an outbound connection? Right? So it's now all about understanding the chain of events that happen. And today, an analyst may have, if it's a small network environment, is going to go to all of those different tools and try to piece it together on their own. A large environment, we hear people would take all of those logs, all of that data, and send it overseas and let someone try to piece it all together, right? So during that time, you're still bleeding. The data is still leaving your environment. So a system that can correlate in real time, give you a timeline view that this device was compromised by a successful brute force login. Machine learning identified that login happened at an anomalous time. My network packets saw that they did a port scan. The network packets also saw that they exploited a vulnerability, jumped on that device after exploiting the vulnerability and make an outbound connection, and we saw the data was being exfiltrated. All of those would have been individual security events that you already have in your environment. But you need a tool, you need a platform, and you need visibility for all of that stuff to get correlated together in a graphical view as well as a timeline view in real time. In real time is important, not after the fact, because you can see this event happened, then this event happened. So a case or an incident is being created in real time. That these 2-3 events happen, and maybe I can stop the bleeding right there, right? I can see that the device has been compromised. I can see, but based on my network packets, that it's having lateral movement. Let me quarantine it, let me contain it before it causes more damage. So correlating amongst all of your tools is probably one of the most important things a security analyst is focused with.
Right, and my apologies. We got a little bit ahead of this slide. I know you have some information, so let's go ahead and talk about your first pain point, right? You have really concise pain points and really concise solutions for this. So let's go ahead and start at the top and finish your thought on where you're at, because it's similar to this.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. We've touched on most of these, but at the end of the day, I don't, an analyst or not an analyst, a client doesn't care what tools we have, what we do, how we do it. It's all about outcomes. It's all about outcomes, right? And these were the 4 challenges that we see and that what we'd like to address. The 4 common challenges are, one is, we talked about, are these, and this is to summarize here. One is, I've got 50 different tools, 50 different places to look for security events. I want a single console that's going to have all of my security events present, right? I don't want to have the swivel chair effect if I'm going to one device versus another device. It's too time consuming and I can miss things. So centralizing is what people look for. And that's what's resolving, is centralize it, bringing all that data in a single location. Well, you can say a SIM tool does that. So I'll talk a little bit about SIM tool, because some people might confuse a platform approach as a SIM tool. A SIM tool was designed to do one thing originally, which is meet compliances which is I want to store all my logs. So if I need to go find something, I can go back and look at it. So it's a consolidation of all of my logs across all of my different tools into a single data lake. Okay, so what analysts started doing is, since I have these logs in a single place, I'm going to go write queries. I'm going to write playbooks. I'm going to write detections. So an analyst is spending more time writing detections than doing actual threat hunting, because they're having to manually write detections. So it would be very helpful for them if the platform that's bringing all of that data in from everywhere, your cloud data, your server data, your network packets, to also have security detections that are built in. You should also have machine learning built in to look for anomalous activity across all of those different tools, right? Looking for anomalous activity at a network level, application usage, bandwidth usage, going to anomalous places. So we look for anomalous activity. So there's two sorts of security detections. It would be, again, the static hundreds of detections that are constantly being updated to look for new things, as well as machine learning to look for things that were never found in the wild before. And then the third one we spend quite a bit of time on is I've got all these tools. I want them to talk together, and I need a place where I'm going to correlate and have a visual view in real time using graph-based machine learning, a visual view of a graphical view of having all of these different devices that are somehow, have observables that are connected together, right? Because to have an individual security event may not have a high criticality, but when you have multiple things that are pointing towards that common compromised device, well, now I've got a much more higher criticality on that. And then the last one, which is when an analyst does find a threat in their environment, we can probably build this out. When an analyst does have a threat that's been identified, they have to log into the firewall. Well, they may even have to open up a trouble ticket to go create that rule, right? They may have to open up a trouble ticket to quarantine that device or disable the user in Active Directory. You should have the ability from that same platform that you found a security event to go take an action on. Right there, click on that event that's saying, go to the firewall and block it, maybe for 15 minutes until I understand what's going on. So these are the 4 challenges that we've seen, and that should be addressed in a single platform.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I know you have one more thing that you wanted to talk through here. So if we could advance on to that. Do we have that infographic? Okay. Let's go ahead and put that up. And Snehal, maybe you can explain to us in correlation in this infographic and tie it all back together, right?
Yes. So these were the 4 challenges that we talked about. And if there was a single graphic that I would show, it would be this one, which is what you're looking at on the left-hand side is a timeline view. Well, first, these are all individual security events from various different tools. The first event came from a Windows machine, a Windows server. The second event came from machine learning or user behavior analytics that said this user logged in at an anomalous time. The third one was network visibility. On my network, I saw a port or an IP scan happen. And then the next one after that, below you can see is I've got an exploit of a vulnerability. Maybe my IDS detected that, right? Or my vulnerability scanner detected that. So these are all individual security events. But what we've listed it in a timeline view. The first thing that happened was a successful brute force login. Within seconds, identified that users never logged in at that time. And then they ran that port scan and eventually exploited a vulnerability, used that device as a jump box, right, to talk outbound. That same timeline view is on your right-hand side. So you can see that device in the middle has been compromised from a security event from the outside on that upper right-hand side. Once that device was compromised from that external entity, you can see the lateral movement it made. It actually jumped onto that server on the left-hand side and ran those commands. And then what it did was the second thing, you can see it compromise that second device by exploiting a vulnerability and using it to talk externally. And then you can see it went to my Office 365 in the cloud and made some changes there. So these are, again, to summarize, all individual security events that are correlated together based on some common observables that we found using graph-based machine learning. And this all happened in real time. This all happened automatically. The analyst did not have to go create any rules or anything like that.
I mean, I think this is a great example, and it enhances a lot of the things that we've talked about. You know, I think if we talked about it, if you'd mentioned it earlier, I'm going to bring it back up, alert fatigue, right? If an individual's looking at every pane of glass for all of those alerts or all of those alerts that you saw there, times thousands a day, they may miss what a platform can do in tying it together.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The other thing,
and Derek, what we've also seen, we've also seen is many times an analyst might just get an alert that says high, medium, low.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you know, that's pretty generic. But today it's important to tie in where that alert happened, right? Where the security event happened. And it's important to tie it in with either the MITRE ATT&CK framework or, more important, the kill chain, which is these particular security events have to do with them trying to get in the environment. These particular security events are all about lateral movement, no matter what the tool was. And then these set of security events are about data that's actually exfiltrating my environment. So an analyst can quickly see, not based on high, medium, low, but hey, I've got these handful of security events from my various different tools where it's showing the data is exfiltrating my environment.
Yeah. Alerts without context or correlation is noise, right?
Correct. Correct.
Right,
and alert fatigue, right?
Yeah,
alert fatigue.
We see
you
it
start
all the
you
time.
becoming immune to it.
Yeah. Right. And I mean, there's so many industry, you know, examples of that we could probably go into. And I'm going to finish on this, right? I'm always passionate about this, and I know SISAP is passionate about this, and that's the skill gap, right? How do you see education changing in the threat detection market within the next 5 years?
You touched on it a little bit earlier. So skill set and making the SOC analyst more efficient, allowing them to do what their real job is important, right? So
Absolutely.
I think moving towards more, stuff based on AI, ML, which is generative AI, right, it's going to help the SOC analysts a lot more. They don't have to learn these new query languages or things like that. So having assistance more and more from a tool that's going to provide that will be important. And this is a race towards that, right? Some people are doing just like including us here, both of us are doing a lot of projecting or modeling, saying, this is the behavior that's expected for this environment, for this particular user, and we're seeing something different today, right? So having having predictive behavior is important, right?
Yeah.
But education, back when we went to school, we did not have any cybersecurity education. We all learned it on the job.
Absolutely.
As an electrical engineer, I had no idea what the internet was, right, when I graduated. But we had to learn it on the fly. Today, there's a lot of education on cybersecurity, machine learning, all of that stuff today. So I think the education is progressing, and I commend CSAP. I know is very much engaged in educating, providing, education services to folks in the region, in Guatemala, in that area, taking those students' resources, applying them into your SOC team. And I think you guys are doing an incredible amount of education within the community, specifically in the security realm. And then applying that education and those resources directly into your ecosystem as well as your partner's ecosystem.
Absolutely. And the reason I asked that question is because I like to ask industry professionals what they think, because like Snehal stated, we build in curriculums as we go through. It's not just the same curriculum as we did last year. We want
Correct.
to continue to move with the industry and teach what's necessary, right? There's still, in my opinion, some great need for the foundational and background information, but we want to actually be looking ahead and providing the industry with those skilled people out of our courses. So
Yeah.
I think we're about out of time, Snehal. I appreciate you joining us today. I think this was a lot of great information. I'm always interested to talk to like-minded people to see how maybe they're thinking about things a little bit differently than we are. So I appreciate you taking the time out, and I appreciate you sitting down and walking us through what you believe the ingredients for being prepared are. So thank you very much, and thank you
Yep.
for all those in attendance. We appreciate you joining us, and we look forward to our next session. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Bye.